So here's a fun fact. Black widow spiders eat their husbands after mating. Yep. And it happens in real life too. I'm going to tell you a story about Betty Newmar, the Black widow granny. So the background here is that Betty was an ordinary grandmother and beauty salon owner in North Carolina. She appeared charming and social and was church going. So the suspicious pattern, though, by the time she got to her sixth marriage, is that all of her other husbands had somehow mysteriously died. Yes, not one, not two, three, four, five husbands mysteriously died before marriage six. And one might think, might that have raised a red flag for husband number six? Well, apparently it didn't. And this was because Black widows are super duper charming. They are the types that raise no flags. That's how they get away with it. And in fact, this, I think, is why so many men out there are afraid of divorce being almost an inevitability. They think that, like, all women are out there, all Black widows out there scheming to just find and entrap a man, mate with him, and then take him for all he's worth, if not leave him for dead. By definition, a Black widow is a woman who takes what she wants and leaves her man for dead or destitution. What I'd like to address is the fact that this is a common misconception about women at large. Now, look, I'm not going to tell you that there aren't Black widows or Black widow types out there. And I'm going to distinguish for you, help you see the difference between your garden variety, and we'll just say that this way, gold digger, right? And a Black widow. And I'm going to tell you about a Black widow trap that can help you make sure that you aren't on the receiving end of this, nefarious scheme. First off, I've read over and over, like in so many groups, and the reason I'm even wanting to bring this up about how men have become so disenchanted with the legal system, with divorce attorneys, and how, women are all utilizing lawyers and the legal system to basically set men up as patsies, where they'll go, get married, have a kid, and then take the man for all he's worth. I'd love to be able to say this, but guys, that's not real. That's not for real at all. That's not what actually happens. In fact, it does sometimes happen that way. I don't think it happens in the Black widow type of way as often as men might think, or in the way that some of these male gurus, and they're out there, they're kind of spinning up, dividing men and women. There's this battle of the sexes. There's this division that's being created by guys who are just like, look, guys, just go your own way. Never get married, build your own empire, then find a honeypot somewhere, especially overseas, and that's the way to go. That, my friend, is just glorified prostitution. You can do that in the United States as well. What you do is you just find someone who's way your junior in a way lower social circle and, take advantage. That's what much older men often do. You don't have to go overseas to do that. I will just say this. It is a gross, and when I'm saying about gross, it is icky, but also it is a massive devaluation of a man to suggest to a man that that is how he should live his life, that that's how he should spend his gifts and spend his time and spend his influence in the world, which is basically to become a self-licking ice cream cone who just, uses some female for sexual gratification. That is not what men were built for. And it breaks my heart to see that there are men, especially ages 45 to 65, who are fathers and grandfathers passing on any type of advice to their sons along the lines of, just don't get married, just don't do it, don't walk into the light. This is not how things were meant to be. And it's all born in fear of women that is being perpetuated by men extrapolating what I would say fringe, and it really is fringe accounts of the horrors of what happened, where you never hear the two sides of the story, where a man just got basically taken to court and taken completely to the cleaners. Again, I will tell you, it does in fact happen. I have seen more than one mail order bride come over to the States, get married, and have a child, thereby getting their papers to be able to stay, divorcing, getting spousal maintenance, getting child support, and living the life that they'd always dreamed of. And it seemed pretty contrived from the very beginning. Most of the time, there was a big age gap. Almost every time there was a big attractiveness gap, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that, only men who can't attract their peers or women in their own country go overseas. And I'm not saying every woman who marries a man overseas has limited capacity, but that is the ones where I see where it is contrived, where it's a type of grift, where a woman is, I'm everything you ever hoped and dreamed of, and I'm going to fulfill your wildest dreams, when all along what they really wanted to do is use you as a meal ticket and a means to an end. What more often happens is that people get married and they don't really get to know the person that they're marrying. They have undiscussed hopes, dreams, visions for their lives. And when the marriage falls apart because he didn't do what I thought he was going to do for me, and she didn't do what I thought she was going to do for me, and you never really discussed it in the first place, and there's all kind of unarticulated needs and expectations, the whole thing falls apart. And then you have to go to court. You have to go to court with somebody who you haven't discussed how things would go in the marriage, much less after the marriage on the front end. And so you can't come together yourselves. You go into a courtroom and you have a complete stranger making big decisions about what's going to happen with your kids, with your assets, with your debts, and you're just stuck. This is the repeated storyline. But getting back to our Black widows, if you really want to know who to look for, it's the girl that's too good to be true. It's the one usually who has something financially to gain. Back to, our girl Betty, she had huge insurance cash outs every single time one of her husbands was mysteriously shot. I think she had only one that died of natural weird causes. There was never a single time until the final one, number 6, was she charged with murder, and that was a contract hit. But she was always charming. She seemed to have her own business. She seemed to have her own money. She seemed to have her own way about it. And I will tell you one thing that she never had, that none of her husbands ever had with her, is a prenup. Not once. And that, my friend, is the trap. It's the trap that can help protect you to make sure that whomever you're on the horizon to marry is not going to be setting you up. Now, at the end of the day, you're going to have those conversations like, hey, this is what I have. Here's what I think should happen with, your money, my money, our money. What I have now remains mine. If we get divorced for these reasons, no reason, here's what you're going to be entitled to. It gets a little sticky, a little bit different when there's child support, because most of the time states set child support. So you have to understand that if you're going to have kids, you're going to have a responsibility to support those kids, and those kids are entitled to the support. So generally you can't contract around or away from that. But spousal support usually, or alimony, is a very different thing. Assets, what assets you get to keep, what assets they have access to. This is something that states allow you to contract around. And I will tell you, if a woman, if her intention with you is merely to snag you, get you to give her a kid, and then leave you so that you can support her in a lifestyle to which she's become accustomed, and, just ride that out, she's never going to sign a prenup. Not a single person whose intention is to screw you over in the end. Now, you may be saying, well, I don't have anything right now. I have young people who come to me whose parents have gone through divorces, who have had parents go through divorces, that have prenups too. You can contract for about anything that you want to include inheritances, like to be certain that any trust or trust income or increase in trust value gets to stay with you, with your kids, whatever you want. And in fact, one of the people groups that are most vulnerable, and I want you men to hear me out, the most vulnerable are older men marrying younger women who have assets. These women, I'm not saying these women are all out to get your assets, but you're most vulnerable when you are older. Let's say you already have kids and you now bring a new stepmom and then maybe a new baby into the situation. In my own family, my grandmother and her sister were completely disinherited when her father remarried, didn't have the proper prenup and or estate planning in place to ensure that his new wife didn't inherit anything. And then subsequently, everything that was their family's went to his wife's children, my grandmother's stepchildren. And in fact, this was all a big part of the family lore. Even after I got licensed to practice law, they were like asking me, is there something we can do? Can you go to France and try to get some of these? And my great grandfather was a very famous artist whose artwork hangs in the Peterhof in the Moscow Museum of Art. There's nothing that can be done. There's nothing I could do. There's nothing anybody can do. The thing you could do up front to protect yourself and to protect your assets, especially if you're worried about predatory women. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be, but I guarantee you, if you ask a black widow, you ask someone who's just out to trap you and kill you or take everything that you have, sign here on the line that is dotted before we ever go into this saying, I don't want anything other than your love. She's never going to sign that.